Hi, today we're going to start on a multi-layer bank project that I did for one of my friends. I'm going to start by clicking this button to open an SVG that I have. Let me go into my CNC folder. We'll go into bank project Wolf SVG. There we go. Pop this open. Cool. Say done, and there's our wolf. And you'll notice that we have two distinct parts now in this wolf. We've got the outline and then this interior leg bit here. So before we go too much further, let's just group them up so we don't miss our opportunity. And let's just set that aside for now. So we have our wolf. Let's just quickly double check our dimensions here. So it's about 10 inches tall by about 6 inches wide. So I don't know if you guys can envision that, but 10 inches is pretty tall for a bank. So let's duplicate this guy. Let's try and leave our original imported one alone for now. What we're going to do is join this up, and let's pick a child's name. We're going to name this child Fred. That is not actually the name of the child that I did this for. And let's actually make this width. Let's see what happens when we make this about 8.5 inches. Perfect. Even though this wolf ends up getting cut out of 3 layers of 1/2 inch or almost 3/4 inch thick plywood, I really like the way that looks. It's still pretty tippy. And so what we need to do is build up a little bit of a base here. And ultimately what I ended up doing is create another platform that it all sort of screws into from the bottom. It has rubber feet so it doesn't slide around. The goal here is to make an inset in the middle here of the wolf so that we can cut a little window and hang some acrylic in there. Okay, so there's our name. We're going to draw a little box here. Let's start right about, come on, snap to grid. You know what, before we do that, let's just make sure our wolf is snap to grid. There we go. Now, let's pick from its toenail here, and we'll go over here, we'll go down, go over, boom. So there's our beginning of our wolf. I'm going to get rid of this interior section for now. We're not going to need it again. Function delete in order to do that. And then we're going to take this, and we're going to join them. And so there's our wolf. But I did like how we could see the wolf's tail there. And so before we move much further, let's just take another wolf. Bring it over here. Let's get rid of that center section. And then we'll take this one and let's line it up. So there we go. What we're going to wind up doing is around the outside here, we'll cut a contour. And then this line, this other wolf that you just saw me put down, we're not going to cut the contour all the way down. We can cut it 1/8 of an inch or 1/4 of an inch or something just so that there's a little bit of detail there. All right, and now let's select that wolf that we just laid down, and what we need to do is create a window in here so we can see all our cash stacking up. And in fact, the entirety of the inside of this Fred box, we'll call it, will also be money, or room for money, I guess. So let's create, let's go in by, I don't know what, 3/4 of an inch, apply. Let's go on the inside of that by another 1/2 inch, apply. Okay, that's a pretty good window. Let's get rid of this one. And what we should really do from this one, let's go on the outside of this by about 1/4 of an inch, apply. And so now what we have is we have the shape for the window. I call them lenses. I don't know why I call them lenses, but I call them lenses. And this is sort of where it's going to rest. And the one last thing we should do before we move on from this is if this is the perimeter of the lens, let's make another inset here and we'll go inside, and let's just go inside by like 2/1000ths of an inch. And we'll zoom in because I want to pick this one off and just sort of drag it aside for now. The way I typically do these kinds of things, where there are multiple layers, lenses, etc., is I'll make multiple files. So one file will be the bank body with all the different tool changes, and one file will be just the lens that gets cut out of acrylic, and it should all just sort of nestle together just fine. So we're going to do this out of 3 layers, like I said. So I'm going to grab the exterior here, copy it, and set this aside for 1 second. And the next trick is, in order to get these things to line up properly, it would be good to have, I call them locator pins. We're going to make them about 1/4 of an inch. So just an arbitrary size for now, and we'll hit scale, and the width will be 0.125. So let's see what happens there. Nope, I did that wrong. So now we wind up with 1/8 of an inch. Let's hit scale again. Actually, you know what? It should just be just a hair above that anyway. So right now it's about 1/8 of an inch. So let's do 0.27. Let's see what happens with that. Again, the goal here is, like, I want to make it 1/4 of an inch, but just ever so slightly more. That way I can just use my 1/4 inch end mill and it will just nicely plunge down in there. And this doesn't have to be like super scientifically straight or done with some great precision, because I'll show you how we're going to cut these holes. One more. There we go. And so once you have one of these done, one of these completely cut, you can use this as a hole guide on the inside of this instead of doing like 2-sided milling, because you want this all the way through on the middle layer. And then if we group this up, and then we duplicate this, there's our back piece, right? And so let's just sort of jog it so they're all on the Shapoko at the same time. But again, these should only be cut, I don't know, 1/4 of an inch deep if this is 1/2 inch thick, maybe even less than that, because again, you want the pins to go all the way through the middle piece and sort of index the back piece to that. And what I did is I put this top layer on top of the middle layer before the pins were in, and used a drill to just sort of drill through. That way I had all my holes in all the right locations. Be careful of this lower corner here where it meets the F. If you're doing any sort of V carving and then you do this pin, it may give you a SAD. You may end up popping through. In fact, you know what? Just for safety's sake, let's just bust this apart for a sec. I don't think we need all 4. It's probably fine just to have 3. That way you don't have to worry about cutting right to the V-carve. Let's just make sure these things are all grouped together. Let's let go of that one. Group. And then this guy. Ooh. Go back. It's very aggressive with its selection tool here. Let's group it together. Boom. All right. So now we have our front, our middle, and our back. This one, before we move on, we should create an inset here. Let's go in by about 1/2 inch. Let's see where we go. Perfect. So again, this will create the recess for where a bunch of the money will go. And we could even do this one too if we went and create an inset. Again, about 1/2 inch. Apply. And what we could do here is a pocketing operation, ultimately is what I did on mine. And now we have all 3 layers. We could create or try to create a Boolean operation here to subtract and cut this apart. I ended up fighting it too much, and I ended up just using handsaw to cut just through a little bit of the material here. I found it just faster. Again, if you were making 10 trillion of these things, then yeah, you want to CNC everything you possibly can. If you're making 1 for a friend or 2 for family members, it's not even worth it. So let's just quickly zip through some toolpath operations. So remember this one. Let's say contour, and I used an 1/8 inch end mill for a lot of it. And let's make sure that if we're doing the outside, we stay on the outside for all of them. So let's say outside, max depth, I don't know, let's go down about 1/4 inch, just so we keep this outline right here is what we're looking for, is the tail. Let's say, okay, and then let's get this, and we should say vcarve. And in vcarve land, this is my 30-degree V-bit. And you know what? There's the only thing I really tweak here is this plunge rate, which I find is sometimes a little too tedious. So let's go to 12 inches per minute. The rest of it, I just kind of leave it usually, and it works out. Okie doke. Now, sometimes when I have an intricate path like this, so remember, there's 2 pieces here. We have the outer lip, and then we have the inside hole. I've found that sometimes this could be very difficult to get tabs nicely sanded on the inside. Your mileage may vary, but we're going to continue with our 1/8 inch bit here. So sometimes I just go ahead and make these like pocketing operations instead. I'm not going to touch the feed here at all. Say okay. And let's just stay on the inside of that hole. Perfect. I know the drawing, it's kind of pointy and jaggedy, but once it's actually cut with the 1/8 inch end mill, it looks a little bit smoother. Use stock bottom. I think the last project I had, I cut acrylic, but we'll save this for now. 1 sec, and we'll jump back in here. I know my stock thickness is going to be 0.57. It's 0.573, something like that, inches for my 1/2 inch thick. It's not quite a 1/2 inch thick. We'll save that. Let's go back into our toolpath, and this guy, yeah, use stock bottom. That way we get all the way through. Let's make sure we have a couple of tabs. I find 12 millimeters massively overkill for this kind of stuff. So let's go down to like 8, and we'll make this 2. And we'll do a tab here and a tab here. Okie doke. And say window inside. Say okay. And then we've got to do this line. And so let's say contour, let's keep it our 1/8 inch end mill. It's probably fine. But let's only go down the thickness of the acrylic lens that we plan on putting in here. The thickness I have for my acrylic that I've been buying is 205. And let's just say, let's make it a, this will be crazy overkill, but we're going to ask it to do a pocket. It's going to end up cutting all of this extra stuff. It's probably fine. Maybe there's a better, quicker operation to do this. But this will guarantee that we get the full shoulder cut with the intricacy that we need. So again, we're going to cut the outside of that with a eighth inch end mill. And so let's call this shoulder, or how about window holder. Perfect. And the last thing that I think is of any interest here is this one. Let's say it's a contour. We're going to do it on the outside. That way we don't have any sort of weird double tail. You should see like right here a little bit of the pattern get preserved. And as I use the stock bottom, we'll do some tabs here. 2, 3, 4, maybe one somewhere up here on its chin. Perfect. And again, this is sort of crazy overkill. 2, perfect. And what I did for these ones is this one, oops, yeah. For this one, I also want to do a contour. Let's do stock bottom. And we'll stay on the inside of this one. Let's add a couple of tabs. This I'm less concerned about. You won't see a whole lot of the tab gunkiness in here, but just for ease of use. 2, boom, boom, boom. And then this one, we can do this guy and this guy. Sometimes you just got to watch these tabs where they are being cut so that these guys don't cut, one tab doesn't leak into the other side, and then as the mill goes by it sort of cuts the tab on you. Okay, there we go. Let's make sure we stay on the outside here like we promised. Cool, cool, cool. Getting there. Now let's cut out this interior. Stay on the inside of this one. Let's add some tabs. Bing. Let's go back to 8. 2. We'll go yoink, 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 yoink. Perfect. Great. So you kind of get where I'm going with this. There's no sense in walking you through setting up all the tool paths at all whatsoever. Interior cutout. The locator pins, maybe that one is a little bit interesting here. We want these ones to be all the way through, right? So let's say this, we use stock bottom. Let's make it a pocketing operation. There we go. Because again, you can use this whole cutout as a drill guide for this one. I'll say okay. And you sort of get where I'm going. And the final, these pins, I would just do it some fraction of the depth of the piece of stock. So that's sort of the bank. So let's hit save on this. And I don't know why this always wants to save it as fonts, but let's go into my bank project here and we'll say Wolf Bank. Bang. All right, cool. So that's saved. Let's quit out of this for 1 second, and we'll go back into CNC projects here, and we'll go into bank project. And what I want to do is duplicate this. Just right click and say duplicate. Perfect. And I'm going to rename this one because the top one is our bank, and this one is our lens. And this is the harder of the two. And I wish I could just double click and launch Carbide, but someday. So now let's go back into our Carbide Create and let's open our lens project. And this always feels a little gratifying to me. I don't need any of this stuff. Boom. So now we have our lens, right? And that's all we really care about here. Remember, this is just like 0.02 of an inch smaller than the pocket that it is going to slide into. Let's hit save. There's one little trick I like to do with the acrylic is, again, if we're going to be doing I can't think. If we're going to have this rest on the shoulder and this is going to be a bank, I don't want this glued in, but I want this to be how you remove money from the bank, is you would have to remove this window, and there will be enough screws where I feel like it's sort of child tamper resistant. They're not going to just go in there and remove all the screws all the time. My daughter has a couple of piggy banks, and she just removes the stopper and plays with the money like it's toys, and I wind up finding change all over the house, worse than I did when I was a bachelor. So I want to make this difficult to remove the cash and sort of dick around with it. So let's just make this circle any arbitrary size here for now. And let's just hit the scale button here. And we want this just a tick under 1/8 of an inch. So if, let's make this, or just over 1/8 of an inch, so like 1/26, how about that? Apply. So that's just a hair over 1/8 of an inch. And ultimately, again, we want this to be just over the edge of the acrylic, but onto that shoulder, which we know is about 1/4 of an inch away. And so I'm going to do another one of my measuring cheats. And I'm going to just sort of click there. And again, this doesn't have to be perfect, but I just want to draw some line so I understand, like, what is the scale of this line? And we want to make this, I think we did it about 1/4 of an inch to 5. All right, and then this I want to come back out to there. So I know as long as my circle is inside here somewhere, sort of maybe right in the middle there, that when this lens is cut and we go through and drill the holes, and what I wound up using is one of the sort of finish washers and a screw, so to cover up the hole as best I could. That these things will all be roughly spaced away from the edge the same amount. So what I wound up doing then is I just sort of copied and I turn off the snap to grid, and that way I could position these. Yoink, yoink, yoink. And again, I won't do all of them. I'll do enough where you guys can sort of understand where I'm going with this. But using that as sort of the standoff, and when we go to make the cuts or do the tool paths, like, you don't have to give these pink lines any tool path. You just have to worry about the circles and the exterior here. And that winds up creating a nice pre-drilled lens, so you don't have to worry about trying to drill through your acrylic or into your bank. Just let the machine do it all for you. Anyway, so that's how I did it, and again, I'll show you a couple of pictures of the project as it went at the tail end here, and I hope that was helpful to you, and Have a good night.